The Mandalorian has been almost universally praised across the Star Wars fanbase, and for good reason. The show's a masterpiece of world building and simple yet effective storytelling, the sort of space adventure story that Star Wars has been sorely lacking in recent years. But The Mandalorian has more to offer than that. It also contains quite a few nods to Star Wars Legends, and it has the potential to bring back some interesting elements of Legends lore. In this video, we'll be taking a look at our top 5 Legends references and concepts that we found in The Mandalorian.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
First and foremost, we have a few small Legends tie-ins that we felt were worth a mention, but not an entry of their own. Is this cheating? Perhaps, but we're making the rules here. The Mandalorian works as well as it does because it establishes the sense of there being a much larger galaxy out there, and it alludes to the small details from Legends to achieve this. Take this one throwaway line from Kuiil the Ugnaught at the end of the second episode. He mentions, when the Mandalorian offers him a job, that he spent his whole life trying to escape servitude. This is true to Legends. In Legends, the entire Ugnaught species was basically enslaved by corrupt businessmen. Another nice reference is the rifle the Mandalorian uses. We'll touch on what the design is a nod to in a moment, but for right now we're going to focus on its functionality. He calls it a pulse rifle at one point, but based on the fact that it disintegrates people, we can conclude that it's either another name for or a specific kind of disruptor rifle. Now, normally disruptors, in both Legends and canon, are just souped up blasters that pack so much energy into one bolt that it disintegrates targets. But the pulse rifle is a bit different. It uses slugs, which is to say physical shells. However, this isn't the first disruptor weapon to work like this. There's a type of disruptor weapon in Legends that works the exact same way, a Mandalorian weapon. And while the pulse rifle looks nothing like the Mandalorian Ripper as we know it, those Rippers were Mandalorian Wars era, so it's probably just an improvement on the technology. Last but not least for our honorable mentions, we have the Mythosaurs. In the first episode, Kuiil claims the Mandalorians once rode the great Mythosaurs, which is a very important callback to Legends. In Legends, the Mythosaurs were a race of massive reptiles that were the apex predator on Mandalore when the Mandalorians discovered the world. To claim their place at the top of the planet's food chain, they hunted the Mythosaurs to extinction, leaving their bones to bleach in the sun. They took the skull of the great beasts as their symbol, and the rest is history. The Mandalorian also contains quite a few nods to the holiday special, of all things. Everyone knows that the holiday special is bad, and we mean truly, genuinely bad, not just subpar for Star Wars. But it's still fairly important. After all, it featured the first appearance of Boba Fett. There are a few nods to the special sprinkled into the show, the most obvious of which is the nod to Life Day, the holidays that the special's plot, if you can call it that, is based around. What's less obvious was the homage to Boba Fett's first appearance. The Mandalorian is somewhat based on this first appearance, with his silver armor and a rifle that looks just like the weapon Fett used in the special. The kicker is in the first episode where the Mandalorian fights off a giant ice dweller that's attacking the Razor Crest. Boba Fett's appearance in the holiday special included a very similar scene in which he uses a weapon similar to the pulse rifle to essentially tame a sea lizard. It's a nice touch and it's earned its place on this list. Next up, we have the direction the show is taking the Mandalorians as a people. We've seen a decent amount of the Mandalorians in canon, through the Clone Wars and Rebels. The latter show established a new backstory and a new set of customs for them, which, while inferior to the original Legends versions, were pretty decent. But The Mandalorian, obviously, is taking it a step further, and while as of this writing we have yet to see how far they'll go, the current direction is very interesting indeed, especially in relations to Legends. Already, the show has brought back several elements of Mandalorian culture that were present in Legends. Beskar, otherwise known as Mandalorian Iron, is once more in play, And that's for the best, as it means our Mandalorian friend has a good bit of protection against both blaster bolts and lightsabers. The legend of the mythosaurs has been reintroduced, which we've already touched on. The structures of Mandalorian tribes, or clans as they were called in Legends, is also similar to the Legends version. They seem to be very loose, but centered around an armorer who has a position of special honor. In particular, the show has brought back the concept of Mandalorian foundlings, which is actually very important. Just watching what had previously been canon, one might assume that the Mandalorians were all one people of a common descent. Now, this assumption is wrong in both canon and Legends. In Legends, the original Mandalorians weren't human at all. They were a reptilian species called the Tongs. As the Tongs began to go extinct just before the Mandalorian Wars, they opened their ranks to all species. Humans eventually came to dominate the Mandalorians, though all species were still accepted into the ranks of the Mandalorians. This legacy of openness led the Mandalorians to adopt children to train in their ways, which is in Legends how Jango Fett became a Mandalorian, and how our protagonist in the new show did as well. This may sound like a small detail, but it's actually quite important. Now, as in Legends, the Mandalorians aren't a people, they're a way of life. They're a culture based around a warrior code, distrusting of outsiders but always willing to adopt new members. It's what makes the Mandalorians Mandalorian. What might be an even more important re-addition to canon is the Imperial Warlords. One can argue about whether canon and Legends did one thing or another better, but it's pretty uncontested that the Legends version of the fall of the Empire was infinitely superior, because, well, it made sense. The canon version of the fall of the Empire took place over the course of a single year after Endor, which ended with the Battle of Jakku. In this brief year, the most powerful faction in the history of the galaxy was completely destroyed, replaced by the New Republic and never to be seen at all until the First Order popped up 30 years later. This is absurd, even for Star Wars. The concept of the Empire just up and vanishing like that is easily the worst part of canon, and what Legends did was far better. In Legends, the fall of the Empire was a gradual process, which makes a lot more sense. Instead of just dissolving, the Empire fractured into factions led by warlords, and the New Republic fought and defeated them individually. It took them 3 years to cut a path to Coruscant. It took them 5 more years after that to become the dominant power in the galaxy, and it took until 19 ABY, 15 years after Endor, to finally end the Galactic Civil War. But it looks like the Mandalorian might actually be patching this whole up. Already, we've seen one Imperial Warlord, and there's evidence that more are coming. The Mandalorian could establish that Warlord factions just retreated to the Rim and splintered even further, which looks like the direction they're going in. This would make a hell of a lot more sense, even if it's not quite as realistic as the Legends version of the story. At this point, I don't think it's possible to have internet and not know about Baby Yoda, even if you haven't watched the show. The child, as he's canonically named, isn't actually Yoda, of course, and he probably isn't related to him either. What he is Force sensitive, and another member of Yoda's species. Yoda's species, for the record, is indeed the established name, both in Legends and canon. Very little is known about it, and for a very specific reason. You see, during the days of the old expanded universe, there were plenty of authors that wanted to explore Yoda's origins and his species. But George Lucas put a complete moratorium on it. He wanted to keep those things a mystery. Other members of the species were introduced, all of which were Force sensitive, it should be said, and a few details of Yoda's backstory were revealed. But for the most part, the whole species was kept shrouded in mystery. But when Disney bought Lucasfilm, that moratorium no longer meant anything, and honestly, I'm surprised they didn't go into Yoda's species earlier. Regardless, they'll certainly be doing it now. So, those are 5 things that The Mandalorian brought in from Legends that we thought were worth discussing. Keep in mind that as of this writing, only 5 episodes are out, so there may be more stuff for us to discuss later. But as per usual, I want to know your thoughts. Are there any other topics from later episodes that you'd be keen to see covered? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, make sure you check out all the links in the description below. We want you to join our Geetsies Gaming Network, where you can join us on our Garry's Mod and our Roblox servers to have fun with other Star Wars fans, play live games on our Imperial, Clone Wars and Dark RP servers. And if you just want to chill out and talk to other Star Wars fans, then our Geetsies main Discord is the bet for you. So make sure you check out that link. And if you're more into history, we also have a second history channel where we cover all the niche and unknown topics of World War II. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.